I know exactly why you clicked on this video. Something changed. Maybe it was reaching for something on a high shelf and feeling your arm shake. Maybe it was standing up from a chair and needing a second to steady yourself. Maybe it was just the mirror, and the version of you standing in it does not look like the version you carry in your memory. No one warned you it would happen this fast. As a physician who has worked with more than 4,800 patients over the age of 65, I have sat across from patients who were told the same thing over and over. Eat more protein, do some light exercise, take a calcium supplement, and most of them did exactly that. They were diligent. They followed the advice, and still, the weakness crept in. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one in mainstream medicine talks about loudly enough. After 65, your body does not lose muscle just because you stop moving. It loses muscle because the biological machinery that rebuilds muscle has quietly changed. The signals are weaker, the repair windows are shorter, and the nutrients you have been told to rely on are no longer being absorbed and used the same way they were at 45. The biggest mistake seniors make is thinking muscle loss is simply about effort. It is not. It is about biology. And once you understand what is actually happening inside your cells, you will understand why certain morning habits can change everything, while others, no matter how consistent you are, barely move the needle. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the 5 most powerful morning habits that rebuild muscle after 65. These are not generic tips. Each one targets a specific mechanism in the aging body. And stay with me, because the second habit on this list addresses a cellular process that most doctors never mention, and the evidence behind it is genuinely remarkable. Before we begin, let me ask you something simple. How old are you, and what made you search for this today? I read every comment personally, and your experiences genuinely shape the content I create. Drop your answer below right now. Let us start with number 5. Habit number 5. The morning protein window, and why you are probably missing it. Most people have heard that protein builds muscle. What most people do not know is that after 65, your muscle cells have a significantly narrower window in which they can actually use that protein effectively. Researchers call this anabolic resistance. It simply means that aging muscle tissue becomes less responsive to the normal protein signals that trigger repair and growth. A 35-year-old can eat protein at almost any time, and their muscles will respond. A 68-year-old has a much shorter window, particularly in the early morning hours, when specific hormonal conditions make protein absorption and muscle protein synthesis more efficient. Here is the mechanism in plain language. While you sleep, your body undergoes fasting. Overnight, muscle protein breakdown rates increase. By morning, your body is primed and ready to shift from breakdown to building, but only if you give it the right material within a specific time frame. Think of it like a loading dock that opens at dawn. The workers are ready. The machinery is running. But if the delivery does not arrive within that window, the dock closes and your body remains in a breakdown state for longer than it should. The research on this is clear. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that older adults who consumed at least 25 to 30 grams of high-quality protein within 30 to 60 minutes of waking showed significantly greater muscle protein synthesis rates compared to those who spread protein intake evenly or skipped breakfast altogether. What counts as high-quality protein in this context? Leucine content matters enormously. Leucine is an amino acid that acts like an ignition key for your muscle-building machinery. Eggs are excellent. Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, and whey protein are among the most leucine-dense options available. If you prefer plant-based sources, a combination of soy protein and pea protein together can approximate the leucine profile of animal sources. The exact usage step is straightforward. Within the first 45 minutes of waking, consume a meal or shake containing 25 to 40 grams of protein. Do not wait until mid-morning. Do not combine it with a very high-fat meal that slows gastric emptying and delays amino acid delivery. Keep it clean, keep it early, and make it consistent. Timeline. Most people report noticeably improved strength and reduced fatigue within 4 to 8 weeks of consistent practice. Habit number 4. Resistance exposure before 10 a.m., smaller than you think. Here's where I want to push back on a common misconception that actually stops people from doing anything. The idea that rebuilding muscle after 65 requires long, intense workout sessions is not only wrong, it is actively harmful to motivation. When people believe they need an hour in a gym, and they cannot manage an hour, in a gym they do nothing, and nothing is the worst possible outcome. The reality, supported by a growing body of research from institutions including the University of Nottingham and the National Institutes of Health, is that very brief bouts of resistant stimulus in the morning can trigger muscle protein synthesis and slow atrophy, even in advanced age. The mechanism here connects to something called the mTOR pathway. mTOR is a protein complex inside your cells that essentially serves as the construction foreman for muscle tissue. When it is activated by mechanical load, meaning the physical stress of resistance, it signals your cells to begin producing new muscle protein. After 65, your mTOR pathway is still functional. It simply needs a stronger, more deliberate nudge than it did at 40. Think of it like a light switch that has developed some resistance over time. You have to push a little harder to get the same result, but the lights still turn on. What is the minimum effective dose? Research suggests that as few as 2 to 3 sets of a compound movement performed to moderate fatigue, even using body weight or light resistance bands, is enough to activate mTOR signaling and shift your body into a muscle-preserving state for the hours that follow. The morning matters specifically because testosterone and growth hormone, both of which support muscle protein synthesis, tend to be at their daily peak in the early morning hours. Morning resistance exposure aligns the mechanical signal with the hormonal environment most favorable for muscle response. Practical steps. Within the first 2 hours of waking, perform 2 to 3 sets of any compound movement you can manage. Wall push-ups, chair squats, resistance band rows, or stair climbing all qualify. Total time required, 7 to 10 minutes. Perform each set until the muscles feel genuinely challenged. Rest 60 to 90 seconds and repeat. Timeline: improved functional strength and reduced joint stiffness within 3 to 6 weeks. Measurable muscle preservation visible over 2 to 3 months. And if you have found any of this useful so far, this is a good moment to subscribe. Every week I release content specifically designed for adults over 60 who want evidence-based information, not generic advice. Hit subscribe so you do not miss what is coming. Habit number 3. Creatine in the morning. The supplement seniors are overlooked for. I want to spend a moment on this one because of a persistent and frustrating misunderstanding in the senior health space. Creatine is almost universally discussed as a young athlete's supplement. It fills the shelves at sports nutrition stores, surrounded by marketing images of 25-year-olds lifting enormous weights. As a result, most adults over 65 have never seriously considered it. That is a significant missed opportunity. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The research on creatine supplementation in older adults is among the most consistent and compelling in all of nutritional geroscience. Multiple peer-reviewed trials, including a landmark meta-analysis published in the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research, have found that creatine supplementation in older adults significantly increases lean muscle mass, improves muscle strength, and reduces fall risk when combined with even modest resistance activity. The mechanism is worth understanding. As you age, your natural creatine stores in muscle tissue decline. Creatine functions like a rapid energy reserve inside your muscle cells. When you draw on your muscles, creatine phosphate donates its phosphate group to regenerate ATP, the actual fuel your muscle fibers use for contraction. Without adequate creatine reserves, muscle contractions fatigue faster, recovery takes longer, and the signal to rebuild becomes weaker. Think of creatine as the emergency fuel cache inside a generator. Your body still has the generator, the wiring is intact, but if the reserve tank is running low, output drops and recovery slows. Refilling the reserve changes the performance of the entire system. What is the right dose for adults over 65? Research consistently supports 3 to 5 grams per day. This is a maintenance dose, not a loading protocol. There is no need for the aggressive loading phases sometimes used by younger athletes. 3 to 5 grams each morning, taken with water or added to a protein shake, is sufficient to gradually saturate muscle creatine stores over 2 to 4 weeks. One important note: creatine draws water into muscle cells as part of its mechanism. Staying well hydrated is important when supplementing, particularly for seniors who may already have reduced thirst sensitivity. Timeline: meaningful improvements in strength and endurance typically appear within 3 to 5 weeks. Affect compounds with long-term consistency. Habit number 2. The circadian light habit. The breakthrough most doctors never mention. Stay with me. Stay with me here, because this is the one most people overlook, and the evidence behind it genuinely surprised me when I first encountered it in the research literature. This habit costs nothing. It requires no supplements, no equipment, and no special preparation. And yet almost no one over 65 is doing it deliberately. I'm talking about morning light exposure within the first 30 minutes of waking. You already know that light exposure affects your sleep-wake cycle. What most people do not know is that your circadian rhythm, the internal 24-hour clock driven by light signals, directly regulates muscle metabolism. Here is the specific mechanism that changes everything. There are clock genes inside your muscle cells. Yes, your actual muscle fibers contain molecular clocks that cycle on a roughly 24-hour schedule. These clock genes regulate when your muscles produce repair proteins, when they are most responsive to insulin and amino acid uptake, and when muscle breakdown rates are highest. Research from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies and multiple subsequent investigations has confirmed that disruption of these muscle-level circadian rhythms, which happens when morning light exposure is delayed or inconsistent, directly impairs muscle protein synthesis, reduces insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue, and accelerates age-related atrophy. Think of it this way. Your muscle cells have a biological schedule they follow. Morning light is the signal that sets that schedule for the day. When that signal is weak, delayed, or absent, the schedule falls out of alignment. Your muscles are essentially trying to operate without knowing what time it is. After 65, this matters more than it did at 40 because the circadian clock mechanism itself becomes less sensitive with age. The signal still works, but it needs to be cleaner and more consistent to produce the same regulatory effect. The practical habit is simple, but must be done consistently. Within the first 20 to 30 minutes of waking, expose your eyes and skin to natural outdoor light for at least 10 minutes. Step outside. Stand by an open window in direct sunlight. The key is natural light, not indoor lighting, which does not carry the full spectrum intensity needed to activate the photoreceptors and clock gene pathways involved. On days when outdoor exposure is not possible, a high-quality light therapy lamp of at least 10,000 lux used for 10 to 15 minutes at eye level can serve as an effective substitute. Timeline: circadian rhythm stabilization begins within 1 to 2 weeks. Researchers typically observe muscle metabolism improvements over 6 to 12 weeks of consistent practice. This is why I placed it at number 2. It is the most underestimated lever on this entire list, and it is free. Habit number 1. The anti-inflammatory morning protocol, the foundation everything else is built on. Here is what ultimately determines whether all of the other habits on this list actually work. You can eat the protein, you can do the resistance stimulus, you can supplement with creatine and get your morning light, but if your body is operating in a state of chronic, low-grade inflammation, none of those signals are being heard clearly. After 65, a process researchers call inflammaging becomes one of the most significant barriers to muscle preservation and regeneration. Inflammaging is not the acute inflammation you experience after an injury. It is a persistent, low-level inflammatory state driven by immune cells that become dysregulated with age. It is like a fire that never quite goes out, constantly burning just below the surface. This background inflammation does several harmful things simultaneously. It directly interferes with mTOR signaling, the construction hormone we discussed earlier. It impairs insulin sensitivity in muscle tissue, reducing how efficiently amino acids and glucose are taken up. It shortens the lifespan of satellite cells, the stem cells your muscles use for repair, and it elevates cortisol over time, which has a direct muscle wasting effect. The most powerful evidence-supported approach I have found for addressing morning inflammaging involves 3 components used together. The first is omega-3 fatty acids. Research published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition found that omega-3 supplementation in older adults, specifically EPA and DHA at doses of 2 to 3 grams per day, significantly reduced inflammatory markers and measurably improved muscle protein synthesis rates. The mechanism involves omega-3s inserting themselves into muscle cell membranes and making them more sensitive to insulin and growth factors. The second component is a simple dietary shift, consuming a small portion of anti-inflammatory foods at your first meal. Berries of any kind, a tablespoon of ground flaxseed, half an avocado, or a handful of walnuts each carry measurable anti-inflammatory properties that influence the inflammatory tone your body carries through the rest of the day. This is not about perfection. It is about consistently giving your body materials that counteract the inflammatory drift that comes with age. The third component may surprise you. It is deliberate hydration before caffeine. Many adults over 65 begin the day immediately with coffee, which has a mild diuretic effect and can slightly elevate cortisol in a body that has already been fasting overnight. Beginning the morning with 12 to 16 ounces of water, ideally with a small pinch of mineral-rich salt or a squeeze of lemon for electrolyte balance, reduces the overnight dehydration state, supports kidney filtration of inflammatory byproducts, and moderates the cortisol spike that can follow caffeine on an empty, dehydrated system. Think of this entire protocol as clearing the lines of communication before you send the important messages. The protein, the resistance, the creatine, the light, all of those signals work better when the noise of inflammation is reduced. Timeline: Significant reductions in inflammatory markers can appear within 4 to 6 weeks. Functional effect on muscle recovery typically becomes noticeable within 8 to 12 weeks. Closing. The consistency message plus next video bridge. Here is the truth I want to leave you with, because I have watched it make the difference between patients who reversed their decline and patients who did not. None of these 5 habits is dramatic in isolation. There is no single morning miracle that undoes years of muscle loss in a week. What these habits represent is a consistent daily message you send to your body. Every morning you provide the protein window. You are telling your muscles the loading dock is open. Every morning you add the light exposure and the resistance. Stimulus. You are telling your cellular machinery that the day has begun and there is work to do. Every morning you reduce the inflammatory noise. You are making sure those messages get through clearly. Biology responds to consistency more than it responds to intensity. The seniors I have worked with who made the most meaningful recoveries, who rebuilt functional strength, who returned to activities they had quietly given up, were not the ones who worked the hardest for 2 weeks. They were the ones who showed up gently, consistently, and intelligently morning after morning. You have everything you need now to begin. If this video helped you, please leave a comment telling me which of the 5 habits you are going to start with tomorrow morning. I read every single one. And share this video with someone you care about who needs to hear this today.